people think that we're looking for gold, which like if we found gold, that would change everything. Not in a good way per se. Like that would make things really messy. So like we don't want to find gold.
Guys, we have a very special guest on tonight. We have one of my very first STEM friends on the entire platform of Twitch. She is a real life archaeologist. She is a real life, I would argue, Pokemon expert, dog mom to an incredible puppers named Dixie, and so much more. It is my honor to introduce the incredible Mallory. Mallory, welcome to the show. How are you doing tonight, madame?
I'm okay. Thank you for having me and for tolerating me and my inability to answer messages sporadically.
You are very busy. You are very busy. We're going to dive into all the things that you are busy in. Uh, let's start from the beginning. You're an archaeologist, right? What does that mean? Just for those who don't know, what does an archaeologist do? Because I know that's one of the common things on your channel. It's not someone who deals with dinosaurs.
Yeah, I know. I've actually been learning quite a bit over the last few years about dinosaurs. It's almost a joke in my content spaces. But as an archaeologist, I mean, I work and study the history of humanity through cultural remains, written records, archaeological excavation, all that kind of stuff. So we are looking to understand more about human history, which I mean, doesn't necessarily include dinosaurs, but some people in the past like dinosaurs too, so possibly, but maybe not in that normal context of, "Oh, we excavate fossilized dinosaur remains." And then we focus on, different parts of different archaeologists focus on different parts of history. So I kind of specialize more in the ancient Near East, the Southern Levant, and but I have in the last several years actually gotten to learn a lot of what I consider modern history, which is more like 19th century uh, historic US for a bunch of different things, enslaved history, kind of some of the historic accounts that we have of founding fathers and that kind of stuff. All that's relevant in that space because I do live in a very 13 colonies space. So I have a lot of work in those kinds of spaces as well.
I guess to take it all back, when did you decide that you wanted to be an archaeologist? And what was your inspiration to, to go down that route?
When I was 8 years old, I decided I wanted to be an archaeologist because I thought I wanted to be an archaeologist. I'm genuinely. I was 8 years old and I decided that's what I wanted to do. Never saw Indiana Jones, never saw any of the cliche things that inspired. I just decided this is what I want to do. So that's
That's
the actual
awesome.
answer.
What was there like a turning point? Was there like there wasn't Indiana Jones? Was there a game? Was there a book? Or was it just, you know what? I want to learn I love history or
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely things that drew me in. Just different. I have always loved history. I definitely have. I Ironically, despite mentioning that I work in some historic capacities here in the US, I find US history to be incredibly boring, at least the accounts of old white men to be very boring. I've since learned that there's so much more to US history, preserving different elements that are really valuable. But really, more like ancient history was really more fascinating to me. I've always loved mythology and those kinds of things. And so, I mean, different media from when I was a little kid, if you saw just not a really great account, things like Liberty's Kids to things like the Magic Treehouse books, and just a bunch of other different pieces of media. But yeah, I just decided one day, I like kind of remember who I was as a small child, but I just kind of decided like this is something that I want to do. And it wasn't really something that I actively pursued, we'll say, until later in college where I was like, "Oh wait, like this is what I want to do. I should probably like focus on these things." But I entered college as a psychology major before switching that all around. So, yeah, it just was something that just was kind of I want to say like always part of me. I don't know if that sounds really silly, but it just it I've always felt this way basically.
that sounds anything but silly. It sounds like there's, something pulling towards you, like pulling you towards this vocation, right? It's not even a job at
Yeah.
that point. So there's this beautiful passion behind it. What
Yeah.
was it in college that was kind of that turning point? And then could you tell us a little bit too, like to become an archaeologist, right? Like what does one have to study in undergrad? What does one have to study to be able to be this, as you are, globe trotting and local trotting historian?
Yeah, I do specifically remember one class that I took, which was like a backgrounds class on the ancient Near East, and it just kind of opened my world. Which also, again, I'm gonna say everything sounds silly in hindsight. Like it's this perfect story for me, but sometimes it almost feels silly to describe it. It feels a little magical or something. But I came from a background that involved a very conservative upbringing, if you will. And so it limited so many things that I had access to and so many things that I wanted to know about. And then I took this backgrounds class. It was an ancient Near Eastern background class in undergrad. And I just was like, this is amazing. This is amazing. That I just loved it. I did. That's really what made me, I think, specifically fall in love with like the Southern Levant and all of those spaces and the Middle East as a whole. And because I was just, I grew up hearing one set of specific stories, set of mythology, and never hearing anything else. And so just getting to it felt like coloring in a picture in a way. Like I had an outline of a picture of something that I felt pulled to, but I didn't have the resources to understand it. And so being in college just kind of started coloring that in and made the picture clearer for me. So, but as it relates to I think there's one specific path that you might see a lot of people who pursue archaeology go down, but at the same time, I think there's a second path that isn't a path at all because there's so many different ways to get there, I think. Whether you study history, public history, anthropology, art history, there's so many things. Like I think you had Melissa and Denial was here last week, right? I don't if I reference her, everyone will know who she is, right? Hopefully they should. They should. But she and I have both had like similar but very different journeys to get to where we are in like our parallel spaces, but there definitely are, depending upon like schools that you go to, access paths or straight paths of, usually anthropology, I think, as undergrad and potentially master's work going into like CRM, cultural resource management, archaeology. There's kind of that path. And then there's this path, which is what I think she and I are both on. And it's just kind of like all these different things. So, we had very different degree patterns and backgrounds, but we still kind of have and again, she's an Egyptologist, she specializes in that, which is still different, but we kind of have ended up in a similar world despite going down completely different routes to get there. I kind of don't think there's really again, like you can pursue anthropology and those kinds of things, but you don't have to. I think it's a little more fluid.
Now, it's really cool to hear those kind of fluid journeys as well because it's a little bit easier than to connect with. Like I don't have to go down this one particular route. For those at home, you said when you took that class in college, that was kind of the eye opener for the coloring book, right? Of like the eye opening part. You mentioned the Levant region. For those at home, what is that? And what about that region really brought you into this? Like, what was the magical part of this location of the world?
Yeah, again, if anybody can relate to like conservative upbringings. I'm trying to be kind of not too specific on this, but these kinds of upbringings, you like hear these stories, you grow up in these environments, you hear these things, and this is not a commentary on that per se, but there is history in this region, and the Southern Levant is going to be places like Jordan, Palestine, Israel, and kind of some other like the perimeter of that. It's kind of part of the Fertile Crescent. If you remember the Fertile Crescent from your history classes, hopefully in middle high school, so it's a part of that, but this is the whole scope of this area because again, if you come from any kind of background similar to mine, your childhood, whatever, you only hear this like little thing, and it's really not enough. It's not. I don't want to say certain things. It's not comprehensive because we know the earliest civilizations stemmed out of these areas. We know about the Fertile Crescent. We know about, the history of the Middle East. And so, just learning about, the history of all the different religions that have come from here, the mythology, the impact on how the world developed is so beautiful in its own way. It's so like again, I will use that illustration of like you have a coloring picture and it's like coloring it in. It just kind of helps me to feel roots because it feels like a humanity roots, if you will. So I think that's what it is like for me in so many ways. Like I care about the humanity of history because it's very easy to look at history as just the names and the dates and the words in a textbook. And there were people who lived all over the world, who innovated things, who created things, who you know preserved things, who endured things. And so I think um, getting the chance to break free from such a limited world and understand that there actually is a world that is a much bigger picture was really important and really impactful to me in the long run.
That's really cool. It's like the part of the upbringing brought it interesting as well, but it's one of those parts of the world too where it's just really cool in terms of the
Yeah.
history, right? Is there is there a particular part of the history of that area that, you know, really excites you, like in terms of a historical time period, or is it just one where I'm kind of a sucker. I'm like 2000 BC to today. I'm like I just dig all of what goes on there, and it's just
Yeah.
so cool to hear about all the various civilizations and languages and origins of humanity that are all rooted in there. What is it about that region in particular that like really like is there a time period that really gets you excited?
A lot of my work, field work, and just kind of like studying has been really like the Bronze Age, which would be about 3,300 BCE ish to about like 1200 ish. Then you're getting into the Iron Age and stuff. I really do like the Iron Age a lot too, but I really a lot of stuff I do is in like Middle Bronze. So and then a lot of that is going to overlap with things, and it's funny like if you talk to an Egyptologist, how they date things is so differently because they're working in terms of like the different dynasties, and so those do run like alongside each other, but they feel so different because I mean that we can match up the dates, but they're thinking of things in the context of these dynasties and I'm typically thinking in the context of like the various ages, whether that's middle bronze 2 versus like iron age or whatever we've got going on. So I really like that. I've done some work in like some Roman spaces too, and even later like Islamic stuff. So you're thinking more like 600-ish CE, kind of, these kind of windows. Um, I joke that that's all too modern for me. I really like stuff that's like 5,000 years old. I do. I think it's crazy that you can hold an artifact, you can hold a piece of pottery that somebody made, 5,000 years ago. I think that's insane in all the best ways. I think it's incredible. So I definitely I middle bronze is probably more my sweet spot, but really kind of just that whole era I really enjoy.
I think it's wild too in one area a 5,000-year-old specimen and then like a modern Coke can, right? You can hold from either end, and it's just like
Yeah.
kind of shows, I think, why it's such a really, really cool part of the world to study when it comes to that history.
Yeah.
So you took the class, you're like,
Mhm.
okay, this is exciting. I'm really into this. What's the next step? What was the next step in that journey? Was there additional course in undergrad, subsequent schooling? Going to
Yeah,
field
grad school,
sites.
obviously.
Right. Right. So
Yeah.
how does one like what was that journey look like, and how did you navigate it?
Yeah. I, speak as someone who I feel like, if you will, benefits from the privilege of thriving in, like, a modern academic setting. I know that is not a space for everyone. It's not a very accommodating space in a lot of ways. Fortunately for me, my brain and my mindsets have always adapted really well to that. So it was never a question as to if I was going to continue to pursue schooling, but just like how and when and where was the money going to come from and what that looked like. So, I jumped right into a master's program studying more ancient Near Eastern history. That was fortunately paid for. It's my only degree that is paid for, but it was completely paid for. So that's great. So, it was just immediately after that. And it was really, though, I did graduate or I finished my master's and I kind of felt lost for about 6 months. I had these degrees, but I knew I didn't want to get into CRM, into cultural resource management. and I wasn't really sure what to do. And then I kind of just started looking for opportunities, looking for field work, for like actual work in the field, really, and what I could do. And so that is within a few more months, I had a team that wanted to bring me on, and I made my way to Jordan for the first time. And so that's where I got to do my first like real work outside of like schooling work in that capacity. So I just was, again, it's very fluid because I didn't really know what I was doing. I don't know, being 23 and having master's degree and no direction in life is an interesting space to exist in, I guess. So I just kind of made it up as I went along, I think.
So you've gotten your master's degree and you're looking for a field site to work at. How does
Mhm.
one even begin to look for a field site? I presumably you can't put an advertisement on LinkedIn that you want to go
No.
dig.
Yeah.
Like, where does that come from? And what was that first dig in Jordan of all places? The first
Yeah.
dig, like, how cool is that? Like, what was that
Yeah.
like?
Yeah, I mean, it's, some of my fondest memories for sure. I, I mean, I just reached out. I'm a little bit bold that way. Like, I just reached out to, a dig director and asked if they had room on a team, and they said yes. And so I got to go, and so I've kind of been under their tutelage this whole time, and became like a member of that actual team. But for folks in general, I don't know if a lot of folks know this. There are quite a few like volunteer opportunities, both like stateside if you live in the U.S. as well as international. I'm not saying that you're gonna just randomly just be a lay person who's doesn't even know what a Munsell soil book is and get a paid gig. I'm not saying that per se, but there are always opportunities, which is a really good way for people, I think, to connect with these things. Again, they can be very um difficult to like not accessible because if you are like a volunteer per se, you're typically going to be like expected to provide your own housing and travel and those kinds of things versus like if you're on a team and you're brought there to work. So but yeah, I just, with my education was able to get some doors open and became part of a team and have been part of that team for many years. We are not actively that particular team is not actively digging right now for a multitude of reasons, including political things going on overseas, unfortunately. But there's still active work in our lab, everything from, dissecting and analyzing pottery and remains and all that kind of stuff to like the publishing that's going on with some of the things that have been found and have been discovered and that we've assessed. But yeah, I mean, I mean, again, standing there and was someone who didn't even like outside. Again, when I think about my journey, it's very funny. People knew I loved this field and wanted to be a part of it, but they were like, "You don't even wanna get dirt on your pants. Like, what do you mean you're gonna be outside in the sun for 8 hours a day, excavating these big giant, you know, about 5 feet by 5 feet squares and moving rocks and sifting things and finding" like, they couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it either, but, here I am.
What does it look like when you're going to one of these sites? Just like from the fundamental perspective of, is it just like these 5 by 5 zones that you're digging for and you're told, hey, this is the thing that we're looking for? Is it that Melissa was telling us that, she's looking at particular eras and looking at the soil and be like, all right, I'm going for this era and everything kind of flanking it. I don't really care about. I might catalog it and put it away, but that's not what I'm going after. So how is
Yeah.
it? Like when you go, what's the setup like, and what were you digging for that first at that first dig site, and how do you know what to look for and how to look for it? Just like all the logistical details, Mallory.
Yeah. It's so crazy to think about, like, how it becomes so second nature, which I don't know if we'll get into this later, and now I apply it to, like, video games and how I just see these things because at first you kind of don't, but, you obviously, especially if you have an academic background, like, you understand these different time periods and what they could be. So, yeah, like, speaking to the very first dig that I was a part of, the very first team, they were working they were looking for Bronze Age is what it was. We were looking for stuff around like, we're thinking in the window of, like, 1700 BCE to, like, 2000 BCE. These are really rough numbers. I also think I might have to be vague on some of these this should be published, but I don't know if I have the authority to tell you what it is. I'm sure you get that, but so that kind of window of time. But it's true, you are like the stratigraphy and everything. You're working through. A lot of times civilizations have built on top of each other. So I have absolutely like ripped up Iron Age roads to get to late Bronze Age buildings and things like that. And then things on top of it. Again, I mean, they do these civilizations, they for whatever reason, one site that I've worked at, there seemed to have been some sort of cataclysmic event, whether it was a war or some other kind of natural phenomenon that seemed to like destroy, like where there's evidence of destruction, ash and everything like that in the various areas. So then it seemed abandoned, long enough for new civilizations to move in. Things like silos have been drilled into, a rampart and different parts of buildings that, would have existed before. And so, yeah, you definitely, I mean, you have to write everything down, draw everything, capture everything, but then you do chuck plenty of things out as needed. If there's something, again, if I'm working at a site that is the goal is, we believe there's evidence of an early Bronze Age civilization, we find Roman stuff, we don't want Roman stuff. Like that's not what we're after. That's not what we're interested in. Again, it's preserved and cataloged, and sometimes you find really great things that are related to that. I worked at a site where we found, again, it was an Islamic um site that I believe there was like a bathhouse, and it was just like this one little piece of it. Like there was nothing really else left, but there was evidence of like this bathhouse. So that was a really great find, and like that was preserved because it was so like cool basically to have that, but like that wasn't the goal of that site. So there's definitely where you're removing things and you're taking things out so that you can get to the goal. Almost like a yeah, I mean, it's like a I don't wanna call it a treasure hunt, but it is. You're not digging straight down, but you are I mean, and again, when you're working in an area, they're assessed differently. People of a little bit higher authority than any role that I've worked in up until this point, they, survey the area. Sometimes you do probes where you might even do it's different depending on where you are in all different spaces. It might be, 1 foot by 1 foot or a meter by a meter or, smaller, and they will do like kind of more, let's look and see, can we find stuff, do we think there's stuff here? So whether it's looking for, the city remains or a rampart or what they think is a palace. I worked in a place where we thought that it was a palace. So and then it's designated like that. So when you're working in archaeology, you typically work in squares, and again they're different sizes depending. And so because the concept is you're digging down, but you're kind of the illustration we say is you're draining a bathtub. Because if you just go and scoop out dirt and make this hole, let's say you find a rock right here and you're like, "Oh, there's a rock in my way." You rip that out. Well, if you had taken the whole thing down together, you might have seen that there were a line of rocks that made a wall, that made a pathway, something like that. So that's when you're working in those things. And then you can also, as you're going down, you can see on the side, like, if you see something like a wall, we'll excavate and see the wall and we'll see, oh, the wall is going that way. It's still, so we might open up another square to keep looking, chasing that wall, something like that, depending upon what it is. Like a lot of times that kind of thing will be assessed in real time, but typically seasons will have designated areas with specific goals for that. Like again, my most recent, we were working in a palace. So or what we thought was a palace that we were trying to uncover.
One question we had from the community is when you're describing this, civilizations building on top of one another, and you're finding like there's a remnants of this building on top of this building. What kind of depth are we dealing with when you're finding that evidence? Because presumably it's not, or maybe it is, like not a whole building on top of which there's another building, right? So it's probably like flattened at some point, right? I would imagine like a civilization came through, flattened it, and you just saw remnants of the building, like you mentioned with the bathhouse. Or how does one
Yeah.
parse that out when it's like, here's the one delineation of an old building from one era, and then here is it from another era?
It depends. It definitely depends. And then you're also dealing with destruction and like dilapidation over time and also modern destruction. Um, while there are ministries and Department of Antiquities in most Middle Eastern countries, not in all cases does the general public care about that preservation or like the military. I've worked near some like military adjacent places. So military might like camp out for necessary work, like, on top of an excavation site, and so it's, like, been destroyed that way, which is really unfortunate. But, yeah, I mean, I've gone down like trying to picture it. Sometimes, if I'm working on the side of a tell, is like a mountain of where you might excavate something. So sometimes working on the side so we can just find, things pretty shallow. But like when we were excavating for that palace, we had to use ladders to get out. We definitely did. So 6, 8, 10 feet, depending upon where you're at and what's going on. And then again, in some cases, yeah, like they will just build on top of things or like expand things, if you will. Like you might have foundations that are reused, like it was a Bronze Age foundation, but then Iron Age like put on top of that. But like an example I can give is again in like the Iron Age, they used a lot of silos. And so they would just drill those silos like just into the ground. So like there are like, you dig down and you find a silo and you're like, why is there something jutting through it? And it's because like they just built it and just kind of like put it right on top instead of like clearing out. They don't necessarily like, again, yeah, if something that was destroyed, then yeah, they just kind of build on top. So yeah, you can get pretty deep again when you're working. The more modern stuff is, I feel like the less deep you go, which isn't always true, but you might work in a like when I say modern, I'm thinking like 17th, 18th, 19th century stuff. They might only get 6 inches deep in everything they need to do to find everything they need. But yeah, I mean, I've definitely 8, 10 feet to get to stuff. So a lot of times the stuff on top is tumble and something like a less relevant context that we can go ahead and take out. But you can. It's a good workout.
What tools do you use to do that? Or I imagine, right? It's a range of tools that you're using depending on at what stage you're looking
Mhm.
for. Is that true? And if so, what kind of tools are we talking?
I thought I had my trowel on my desk. I don't. I think it's back here. It is. So, I mean, a trowel, like literally a trowel, like you would think from gardening, is a handy tool. When you're doing bigger stuff, we don't use machinery. Like you wouldn't bring in like a backhoe or something like that to move dirt. But I mean, sometimes you're using like an actual pickaxe. I've used plenty of pickaxe to break up things that are more solid that are, need to be sifted a bit more. And then you're removing that out, you're taking that out of there. And then once you get to the actual like context of what you're trying to find, whether that's again a building or a structure or artifacts, you typically are going to be using the smaller tools. So like my two main tools would be my trowel, and then I do have a hand pick that is about this big. I mean, it's about this wide. So that's for clarifying. I mean, I definitely use my trowel more, but I have not only like a regular trowel, but I also have a like a straight edge one, so it's a rectangle, so I can get like really straight lines when I'm like cutting into a bulk line, which would be like the square perimeter. So if you're trying to really get a straight look, so those are your smaller tools on your more detailed work.
So it's not really brushing. Like you're not using a paintbrush to delve. That's like when you just get to like the actual when you've seen
Brushes are
that.
for pictures mainly.
Oh, they're for
When you
oh.
need to yeah, okay, so yeah, if you do need to capture a picture, then you would brush the area. You'd wanna have it as clear as possible, and then you've got your signage and stuff to mark, like, what square it is, everything that all the details about it, the year, all that kinda stuff. So you would wanna brush stuff off. It's really annoying when you're brushing stuff off and somebody still steps and leaves a footprint, you have to go back in and clean all of that up. I've done that so many times. But yeah, typically, I mean, again, you can brush stuff, um but yeah, I mean, your trowel is honestly gonna go further. It really is.
That's cool to know because it's like, the differences that we see in like movies and TV shows versus like what
Yeah.
actually goes on. Like I'm envisioning you with just like this giant pickaxe just like going at at the square, and it's a really powerful image, right? Like
Mhm.
it's actually today is in fact actually International Women's Day on during Women's History Month, and we have
Mhm.
Mallory with the image of you holding a pickaxe just like going and digging. Like that's really cool. That is so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Do you have, in thinking about the various sites that you've been at, is there a favorite site and or favorite discovery that you've made? Like where you're like, man, that thing that I found, that is really cool.
Um, I when I think about, like, more ancient things, I at one site I worked at, I did, find a silo, but it was really special because most silos are gonna be from, like, the Iron Age, and so are gonna be made out of stone, but this one had like a plaster in it, which was we think for probably water, but we didn't have any others like that. That was the only one we found. And it also is really great for shade if anybody ever decides to get into archaeology when it gets really hot. If you're down deep in a silo, if you're sitting 4 feet deep in a silo that covers you, like you're not in the direct son. But that was a really cool thing because we really didn't have a full answer for it, but it likely is that it's water because you can sift like a silo, you can sift the dirt in it and likely find like grain and things like that when you run all that through. But that was a really cool. And then I would say the other thing is that I found a cooking vessel. You have like taboons and stuff, which are like cooking kind of ovens. But this one was more like the best way I can describe it is like a smoker. Like it was like we're talking an ancient smoker, which I think is it has a name too. I want to say it's called a tenor, but I feel like that's not the correct name. But I did find that, and it had like pockets of ash in it from and what seemed to be like evidence of when it had been cooked in. So again, that site there seemed to be evidence of like something that took the city out. So maybe somebody was cooking something when whatever happened, but it that was really kind of cool because we had found a bunch of cooking ovens, but that one was different. Like we had to actually get like the Department of Antiquities guys to come in and look at that more closely because they were everybody was a little bit puzzled by it compared to what we knew about the other ones. Um and I have done some excavating and some more modern stuff. Again, I just consider anything before like the Roman era just to become or after the Roman era to be just very modern to me. But I've done some work at an armory and hotel in the US, and it was a site, and then there's like a tavern as well. It's like kind of a whole street that they're trying to excavate. So I helped with a bunch of work over there, and I found some really cool glass bottles, which is really cool because you would never find glass bottles in something from 4,000 years ago. So that's always really neat. But we also found bobby pins, which is such a crazy thing to find, but that helped us to understand that we had a belief that that particular site was once like a girls' like housing system or school before it became a tavern. And so we were able to find these like 18th century, like 19th century bobby pins. That was really neat. I don't, when people think about history, I think a lot of people just think about war, which I find very boring. But like when you think about things like women's fashion history, like what a cool and like niche element of history. So finding like a piece of that feels really really cool. You find like buttons and things like that. It's very neat. And it's also very culture shock for me as someone who primarily digs in the dirt and finds old pottery that is not very refined and is not very pretty to most people. To see things like a button or a bobby pin is really neat.
I get that's a really cool take too of like it's not just the war stuff that you might find, but
Yeah.
like the smoker, right? That
Yeah.
leap points to like diet, food preparation.
Mhm.
Like you're there's so many layers of that culture's history that you're unwrapping there just from like this unique cooking device,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Um what you mentioned you did work in the US too. What are like the big glaring differences like when because like doing stuff for in the Middle East versus the US? I assume there's like a bunch of local like legalese things that you have to go by. I imagine we don't have a Department of Antiquities that you have to come out and have
No, not quite.
categorized. Like what are like some of those big differences in working at the two different sites?
Really what you find, which I know is very obvious, but like I said, it really can be like a very like jarring thing because I also will just say like when it comes to some of that older stuff, especially when you're removing, other civilizations, things more, Roman stuff or wherever you're digging to on top of it, things I don't want to say things get thrown out because things do get kept, but at the same time a lot of things do get thrown out in part because they can't be properly cataloged and assessed. We have something called diagnostics, which, when you're talking about ancient pottery, that's typically going to be like a base of a vessel, a handle, or like a rim. Sometimes there's a couple other things if there happens to be paint on it, things like that. A potter's mark, if they leave like their thumbprint on, a space of it. So you have those kinds of things. But like body sherds are kind of worthless unless you have more of the vessel. So you can't tell anything from them. So I am so used to chucking out a lot of things, not in any kind of disrespect, but because they literally cannot be properly assessed and analyzed. But if you were to like, you can get a fragment of this size from the 19th or 20th century, and not only do you have to keep it, they can tell you like the year, that piece was made. Like they can get such a more accurate reading, which, I think that's pretty understandable for most people to realize, but they forget, like, the further you go back, the harder it is to know. The bigger the windows of time get, the less clear it is. So this modern stuff allows for that. But yeah, as far as like, it's all political, it really is. History itself is political, so that doesn't change, and you're dealing with political dynamics between different industries and organizations and government authorities. Like, that does exist in both spaces, but it definitely looks different. And I would say one of the biggest things here in the US is with how charged a lot of things are politically. You have to advocate for things to be preserved in a lot of ways that I don't think you need to do over in the Middle East. Again, like, you have something like a ministry or a Department of Antiquities. They are there to preserve that ancient history that exists in their culture and in their country and in their region. But here, advocating for things like the preservation of enslaved communities is something that we have to fight for. It is, unfortunately. Like, it's something that is not. There are a lot of people that think that preserving that is going to tarnish others, when if we can tell those stories of people who lived under great duress and oppression their entire lives, then we should tell those stories. And it's incredible what we can learn from those things now because there are people advocating for that. So I think that's probably, aside from like the schematics, I mean, you're always doing paperwork and drawings, and it looks a little bit different. Squares are a bit smaller here typically, like you might work in a much smaller space. Again, you're not digging as deep because you don't need to. You're not, what you're trying to find is not from that long ago. So you're dealing with those kinds of things, but I think that's probably where I see like the biggest difference is where I feel like we have to advocate more for the preservation of things here, for specific preservation of certain things here, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. You also mentioned, Mal, that you're digging in the field, but that's not the only thing that you're doing, right? You mentioned that there's also lab work and publications associated with it.
Mhm.
So, what are some of the lab techniques that are done when it comes to your field? Like, you've gone out, you've collected these specimens. Now, what do you do with them? And what does that lab look like? Because, when I think of
Yeah.
lab, I think of pipettes and, black slate desktops. What does your lab look like? And what is it that you're trying to do now in the lab setting after the field?
Yeah, when it comes to, the more ancient stuff, a lot of what we're doing is reading pottery, which you're not literally reading words. It would be great if you were, but we're assessing, again, those diagnostic pieces. That's something that's gonna go back. They need to be cleaned and, like, properly bagged and tagged and all of that, and we have, other artifacts that we find, like, sometimes we find, like, a mortar and pestle or just other different things that can be found, fragments of other pieces, and then they're assessed to get full context. Because if we, have a square, when you excavate, everything is tagged according to your square and like where it's found and all these different things. And if specific special things again are found, so we're thinking like a unique tool that isn't just a bunch of pottery, not to downplay it. I love pottery. I love ancient pottery. That's get a little more detailed. But then, if we're working in this one square and we find that, hey, we're looking for middle bronze here, and we're finding all this late bronze stuff in this square, which is part of what we think is a room from some building. Like, we might be working on going deeper or like working around that more because, okay, we're finding stuff closer to what we're looking for here. And so we're able to assess what types of vessels they all are, the size that we think they were, whether they were like water jugs or pots or, different kinds of things. And it can help give us this insight again if you're finding things that look a certain way and if they appear to be, cooking, types of things, or if we find things like palace ware, which is much rarer, but that's going to be look a lot nicer, and you can usually tell pretty easily. It's going to look a lot nicer. It's going to be thinner. It's going to be more refined because obviously that's going to be something that's used for like royalty in that space versus common people in the city and whatever. So I mean, and then a lot of things it depends on the scope, because archaeology, like many sciences and everything else, is incredibly underfunded and incredibly underappreciated. A lot of fundraising and all that kind of stuff is necessary. So things like carbon dating and stuff still happens, but like a lot of the teams that I've worked with, like we send stuff off. Like we don't have the resources to have that kind of equipment. So we will send it off to get it done and then, have it brought back in. But that's definitely like one of the biggest barriers that I see. So a lot of times a big focus is really like just the specific artifacts we find and cataloging them and seeing if it can help us better understand what we're looking at in whatever area we're in.
So is it fair to say that you're out in the field, you're digging, you're collecting these specimens, you take them back to the lab, and then you use that time in the lab when you're not able to be in the field to assess the quality of the site in terms of the historical implications of what you found in order to refine if whether or not you go back to that site and continue looking for your initial question?
Yeah, kinda like, are we getting closer to what we're looking for kinda thing. Yeah, so if we're working in, I've worked in a space where we were excavating, we just couldn't find anything that wasn't Iron Age. Everything was Iron Age. We were like, "Okay, like, clearly something settled here. There was civilization here, but I don't think what we're looking for is gonna be found here." Because, no matter what, we've dug deeper, everything we've pulled out seems to be, and it also was like late Iron Age, like, it's not even close to some of the stuff that we're looking for. So yeah, it's really like it helps you. Thinking of like a dowsing machine, which feels really silly to say, but it's kind of like that. Like it's you're not. It helps you know if you're like getting closer, basically. If you're right, which you could be wrong. So much of history, as well as I'm sure a lot of things, is it's theory. It's here's what we have based on the clues that we have. We're believing that this could be what we're looking for. This is what we're hoping for. The signs point to this, but you're always adjusting because you learn new information and you can only go based on what you know, and you don't want to claim something definitively that you don't know definitively.
At what point do you say it's not, this isn't the site? Like, because that feels like that would be a really hard thing to do, right? It's almost like in, like, at
Yeah.
least in the molecular biology side of things, like, I'm doing this experiment, I've invested 6 months worth of time on there, and it's like I'm just not getting the answer. At what point are you like, you know what, this dig site, we were wrong, and we need to reassess and go back and just again kind of look at the field from scratch on where to start the
Yeah.
you dig again?
It might depend on like your directors and funding, in all honesty. Because there are definitely sites where like they've been excavated for like 5 or 10 years and then they were like abandoned for whatever reason, whether they ran out of money or they couldn't justify the work that was going on there. I hate to say that, but I mean there's definitely people who will like walk away from that. But like I've definitely worked with some folks who are like really passionate about trying to preserve a specific site. So and sometimes again, like you find stuff that maybe isn't what you were looking for, but it's still like worth preserving. So, it's kind of that back and forth. And that's definitely been stuff that's I've never made a call on. It's above my pay grade, which is okay. So but that really is I feel like what you probably see is the is it worth continuing to put the financial resources into it? I hate to say it that way, but that's the reality of so much of these spaces is like, do we have the money? Can we afford it? And so often you can't. So it's I hate it's a labor of love in its own way. Like the desire to preserve these things and protect these things usually comes from people who are passionate about the history.
uh it feels all too similar in other fields as well, right? Especially when it
Yeah.
comes to the finances.
Yeah.
You mentioned like the carbon 14 even dating is
Mhm.
right, that has to be sent off because of just like
Yeah.
you don't have your own. If I were to be like, Mallory, I'm gonna give you just a blank check for any piece of equipment that you want that would help you in your research, what would it be? Like, what's the Rolls Royce in
Mhm.
archaeology?
I mean, I say it was different for, like, different people. I guess, I don't know. Like, it would depend on who you're asking, because I yeah, see, one of the things that does happen that's different, I would say, overseas compared to, like, here is that, like, in the US, like, you have, like, land ownership, and it's not that you don't have that in other places, but, like, I worked at a site where, it's one of the sites that I've put the most, like, time into, where, like, we've lost pieces of it. Like, picture a big giant mountain, and, like, every year a little bit of it is gone from the sides because it's being destroyed by local farmers and all these different things, like they're trying to, grow more or whatever it is. And because there's not like a so, like, I would wanna buy the property is what I would wanna do. I would wanna buy the entire tell, and I would wanna be able to, like, preserve that and then, like, figure out where I'm gonna get the rest of the money for. So, I don't know, that's kind of like a cop out answer, but, I think that's maybe, like, more of where I would see myself, but also having, like like, a truck is nice to, like, climb up a mountain because when you have to walk that 15-minute, 30-minute journey every day, like, genuinely, a truck is really nice. I worked on one team where we got a truck, and it was really it's really great, because then you could just not burn yourself out because you have to carry the equipment up too, like, you're carrying up all the pickaxes and all of the hoes and all of the, wheelbarrows and everything, so, I mean, so much of yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that lab stuff would be beneficial, but I don't know, I don't know. I don't know if I can give you a direct answer. I don't feel like I did a very good job
No, I
answering that
think you
one.
did a perfect job because it goes to show just how difficult it is, right? If you can buy the
Yeah.
land, then you can stop people from encroaching.
Yeah.
And because presumably too, like erosion probably plays into it too. If you're
Mhm.
not protecting like edge of landscapes, right? And then people are walking or traversing, even if you're
Mhm.
having a certain barrier, you're gonna keep losing information. So I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's a great answer. A
Yeah.
member of chat said a time machine would probably be an ideal piece of
Yeah.
equipment.
Yeah. Something that would make people care because it's very hard. I mean, people think that we're looking for gold, which like if we found gold, that would change everything. Not in a good way per se. Like that would make things really messy. So like we don't want to find gold. That's really not what we find at all. But so like people, like looters and stuff, like they think we're up there like digging for treasure when I'm like, no, I'm looking for a handle for a piece of pottery. I promise you. Now is it's priceless to me, but that's like, if we could, yeah, a time machine and something that would help people understand the value of preserving these kinds of things and that we're not looking for gold.
Is there difficulty of that? Like when you're going to a particular site about being vague of where exactly you're going to be digging on the off chance there might be looters, either thinking that maybe you're looking for gold or, well, Mallory told me that this thing is priceless. So I'm just going to try to get in there and take it.
Um, there are yes and no. You also deal with like you definitely have more like nomadic and like Bedouin like people in some of these countries. So you might see people who are there one year and not the next. And they're usually just like chilling with their sheep and stuff. Like they really are, but they might be curious as to what's going on. So it's like possible that things can happen. But typically, like if people go up there and they see what's going on, they'll be like, this is just rocks. And so, it depends. I think it can depend on what you're dealing with and what it is that you're excavating. But um yeah, I don't know if that was
No, but that's really
very
cool.
yeah.
Is there, I guess, on the flip side, did you ever have to do any like community buy-in of a given area that being like, hey, we want to dig here and we want the support from local communities to like let us here because we might be viewed as outsiders, right? Like, how does one
Yeah.
navigate that?
Yeah, I can speak to one, actually a couple. A lot of there's over in the entire Middle East, I believe there's over it might not be this number now. There's like over 100 like active sites that are like, have teams that come in for a period of time. And so I've been a part of a few of them, but like one that I work with, like we hire locals as well to do like the grunt labor, like moving the big mounds of dirt. Like I will excavate it to make sure there's nothing there, but then they will haul it. So, and it builds like a really great relationship. Like we've had, I mean, one team that I'm a part of, they've been 18, 20 years. I can't remember how many years they've been doing it. But so they have this long-standing relationship with this community because they get work when they come in and they, get free lunch with us and they enjoy their time and we've watched them grow up and like there's a local mosque that we, have a relationship with and they've invited us to dinner and things like that. So it's really like I mean in that way you get this really beautiful like cultural blending and mutual respect of different communities because it can be like why are all these people coming here, what are they doing, but once they like it's kind of a buy-in for everybody. Like everybody kind of is sold on the value of it. So that's I think one way that you see a lot of that is you'll see hired labor, which I think is great. I mean obviously it's benefit to the economy, to the people in the community, and then it's a relationship building thing.
Are there any difficulties if a given group of people think a particular site is sacred, whether or not you're allowed to dig at that site, and or if you are allowed to dig, are there extra things that you have to do to have that community buy-in or just protect it in a unique way?
I mean, typically you are gonna be working with like a Ministry of Antiquities and those kinds of things. So you're gonna be working with that government. So they will have representatives, maybe not there all the time, but like they're there. So you do have like you can't just show up to like Palestine and just start digging in the dirt. You know what I mean? Like you have to there is, there's something that has to be there's paperwork, there's all that kind of stuff. So I think you kind of have the support in that way. But there can be politically charged things where like they decide they no longer want you to come in and do it, which can be its own headache, or they make the paperwork way more difficult, or there's again, it's kind of always those political dynamics that do always exist in those spaces.
Speaking of headaches, or maybe not headaches, I would love for you to tell us it wasn't a headache, but we are focusing on women in STEAM this month. Um, could you tell us if there were particular challenges in your field because you're a woman in STEM, or were there actually lack of challenges? Were you lucky in that it was just always welcoming, or and if not, how did you navigate it, and what advice would you give to the next generation of women wanting to be archaeologists?
Yeah. I From the moment that I like actually started doing field work, I always felt welcomed. I really did. I have existed in a lot of spaces as a woman where I have not felt welcomed. Spaces that I'm still a part of today, fandoms, those kinds of things. I don't feel welcome. I don't feel safe. But I personally, and I don't want to erase anybody else who hasn't felt this way. I've always felt like I look around and I see more women than I see other folks in these spaces, which I love. I do, because I do think a lot of these spaces are very male dominated. But for whatever reason, archaeology to me has always been like, I would say I experience the most negativity outside of the archaeological community. Like if I tell a random man about this, they'll mansplain. They'll act like I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't have experience, or I don't have qualifications to speak on a topic. But like I have been really fortunate. Like directors that I've worked with, dig directors, supervisors, like just I've always felt pretty good in it, which is probably I mean, I would have fought to feel good in it, but I really have. So I don't know if I don't I mean, obviously, the tides are always changing for women's roles in these different spaces, but I think about like famed women archaeologists. Some of the most, famed and successful archaeologists are women. So I think I look at them, like Kathleen Kenyon and others, as like inspiration. So I think it's now is always a great time to get in. Anytime is a great time to get in. I want to see more women in the field. And again, I think the preservation of history is so important. And like I jokingly said, but I do kind of mean with sincerity, a lot of people seem to only care about history as it relates to war and conflict, which, like, obviously those are parts of history, but history is so much more. And I'm seeing not only women get into the space, but I'm seeing women like really preserving very specific parts of this space. I don't know. Like, and I think that's like I have a friend who finished her dissertation, and she did it on this like very specific like bull motif that exists in like the Minoan religion. For anybody knows what that is. Like and like I mean, I know you and I have talked about this. Like you niche down so much in a PhD, in a dissertation, and it's just like I don't know. I feel like women have such like creative and interesting minds. They're so like dedicated to the things that they focus on, that we need more women, because there's so many things to preserve. There's so many things to dedicate ourselves to. And this is a great field to dedicate yourself to, I believe.
I love that. One thing I know, Mal, that you do, and you kind of alluded to earlier, is you've started to see the history and the connections with like your archaeological training in modern day elements as well, right? So one way that you highlight this and you share this with, the world is your social medias like Twitch and TikTok. How did you get started in those as an educator, and how has that evolved over the years?
It's like the I've said this about everything, haven't I? It's like the weirdest thing to look back on. I've like tried my hand at like content and social media just a couple times. And by try I mean like I posted like one video and it wasn't good, a kind of thing. But I had just gotten back from my dig in February of 2020, which as we all know, nothing was going on in the world in the beginning of 20 nothing of significance. I can tell you all that when I left, to go work, there was no questions at the airport. When I came back, there were a lot of questions at the airport, if you wanna understand the timeline. And I was like, "You know what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make an Instagram account and, like, talk about archaeology, like, I'm just gonna do it." And so I made that account, and then, like, a couple months later, I decided to make a Twitch account. Some friends were like, "You should, we're on, like, on Twitch." And I wasn't streaming or anything, but I was like, "Okay." So, like, I made a Twitch account. I had never had one before. And then, like, a little more time goes by. I, like, started streaming. I started streaming in March 1st of 2021. My 5-year streaming anniversary was this week. Um, and then I just started dabbling in some other things. The big one for me is obviously Pokemon, and, I just was like, "Wait, what if I, like, talked about how there's, like, archaeology in Pokemon?" And I posted this, like, little TikTok teaser, um, and I woke up the next morning and had, like, 2,000 new followers on my, like, account with 200 followers. And that was a lot. Like, I mean, it's still a lot, but I was like, "Whoa, I've got, like, 80 followers on Twitch and all this, like, I don't know what I'm doing." My passion first really, like, is education. It always has been. I love education. I care about it so deeply. I care about teaching the next generation. My work here is in public history. Like, I mainly, like, teach kids at our museum, and, I love it so much. Like, it's so important to me. And while my audience online is not children at all, it's their parents. I teach them during the day, and then I play games with their parents, like, later. I I said earlier how I benefit from the privilege of, like, having a mind that just adapts to, like, education and that kind of stuff. So many people don't, and so many people don't have the resources for these things. They don't have I mean, people can't go out and buy the scores of textbooks on, again, like, ancient Near Eastern history that I have in the room across from me. Like, they can't do that. Especially when you're getting into those kinds of things, a lot of that stuff doesn't exist online. I'm not here to I mean, I will be clear that, generative AI is not gonna give you the answer you're looking for. And you're lucky if Google can find some of these things because a lot of these things don't exist in an online capacity. But I just was like, if I pull out these like basic concepts, these simple concepts, like I can help teach people things like again simple things, the simple concept of what excavating looks like, the simple concept of a mythological reference from the ancient Near East or Japan or wherever it is, and just kind of like blend it together. It's things that I love, but it's a way to like help people just like learn a little bit. It's like I'm tricking you all into learning is what it is. But I'm like, you know what I mean? It's taking those simple things and helping people connect the dots because I'm so fortunate to have had the education that I've had so far and that I continue to have and the experiences that I have. And so many people will never get to have that. So like if I can bridge that gap just a little bit, I feel like hopefully it'll benefit somebody.
Do you have a favorite Pokemon archaeology connection that you love to hook people with? Like one of your favorites, like this thing is gonna get you down here.
Mm. Favorite. I mean, right now, right now, it's Heliolisk. He sits on my desk, because this is a TCG card from what is this, from Twilight Masquerade? This is from Twilight Masquerade, which is a set from a couple of years ago. It's just an innocuous common card. This card costs 5 cents, but if you can see in the background I'm moving this the wrong way. If you can see in the background, there's ruins in the background, and if you do a little research on Heliolisk, It has a Pokédex entry that talks about how it actually was loved by an ancient civilization in the Pokemon universe, and it's like believed that this Pokemon like helped them like learn how to generate electricity. So it's just like little tiny things like that where I'm like, hey, do you know that this Pokemon is like responsible for like helping an ancient civilization like develop technology? And so it's like little hooks like that that I think are ways that I try to capture people. We have the new title that just came out this past week, Pokopia, which I know you're playing. I don't want to spoil it for anybody too much, so plug your ears if you don't want to hear this. But well, this isn't too big of a spoiler. In that first area you're in, there's like roads. They're damaged, but there's like remains of roads. I spent all of yesterday basically excavating in the game, like I would a square, and I took out a section and it like was clearing so that I could just walk on the road, but it also showed that the road actually veered off and went a different direction, which you wouldn't find. Like I was just chasing a road like I would in regular field work. So I don't know, just like little things like that where I'm like, I sometimes they lack with the accuracy of the things that they talk about or that they showcase. There's plenty of times where they call paleontologists archaeologists in Pokemon, for example. But like little things like that, I'm like, hey, that's like that would be a really big find in archaeology, and here's why. And just kind of like helping people again, just like bridge these little connections, and hopefully like a couple synapses in their brains fire, and then I'll convert everybody to become archaeologists. That's my goal. That's my long term strategy. You will all become archaeologists with me.
I love it. One of the my favorite things that you taught me about was a in the Pokemon universe, there's a game Legends ZA, and there's a museum, and you primed me to go through that museum and look at all the features. And there's like one mission in this game, right, that you like are collecting a Pokemon, and there's a bunch of them.
Yeah, speak
But
by yeah.
yeah, but how you when you spoke to us and put through your lens of how to look at that particular museum and like what it means from a historical context. And yeah, it's in the Pokemon universe, but you're approaching it from that archaeologist historian perspective. And it's like, it's so cool to have that take.
Yeah. I have a lot of fun that way. Like I mean, yeah, like just looking at those things, there's that one and like a lot of the art in there is styled after like real life art. Like it's supposed to be like there's the one of Diancie and it's supposed to be like the girl with the pearl earring, like it's supposed to be that. But I know I told you about Diancie as it relates to and Carbank and whether it's a mutation or like an actual genetic predisposition for a queen in a colony. Which is like again, like how cool is that? Like how cool they built that system into a Pokemon line. Like that's amazing. So but yeah, when you look at it through that lens, again, it's color in that picture. It makes the world more colorful for me. It really does. And I hope it does for other people too, because I find it like really interesting. And I think it's a really good way. Again, especially if you live in a place like America, like you may not feel like even in your normal education, you got the chance to experience other things. And obviously, something like Pokemon is inherently like not American media, it's Japanese, but learning little glimpses of Japanese mythology, history, Chinese history, Mesopotamian history, just different things is really cool. And like, you know, they have every right to criticize the company and these organizations and all that, but like the history is rich. It really is. Like there are things to criticize them for, but you can't deny the care that is put into a lot of things that they do. Like somebody had to make that Diancie painting to look like the girl with the pearl earring. And so, somebody like an artist had to make that. So, and it's worth, I think, celebrating from that angle. And I don't know, I feel like it makes I don't want to say makes it easier to understand the world. Again, I don't want to spoil Pokopia, but as an archaeologist, I may have never been happier than I am playing this game because of what's being revealed in this game, which is genuinely crazy to me. But I mean, Legends ZA was great. Legends Arceus was great. Like those were both great for that as well. But Pokopia is like, I'm pretty sure they made the game for me. You're literally finding archaeological remains. Like I'm pretty sure they made the game for me.
I love that there's in the game these human documents, right? The way that it's
Mhm.
phrased, like how you're learning about what happened to the humans and you're reading documentations
Yeah.
of them. And I had seen some shorts that you'd also posted on the topic as well of just like, again, taking having your interpretation of it makes it all the more exciting that there is like
Yeah.
this almost like accuracy to how it's built, right? Or like the
Well, that's
mindset.
Yeah. Go ahead, sorry.
No, no, go please.
I was gonna say, like, that's what I've been, like, kind of reconstructing the roads just as, like a self-regulating kinda thing in the game, like, I haven't advanced the story a ton, but, like, when you look if you go to, like, an area, like, there's a coastal area, I don't wanna spoil too much for folks, but there's an area, and so, like, there's bridges, and they've, like, all collapsed because it's been however long it's been. If you look down, there are pieces of the bridge, like, in the water, like, they intentionally placed a tile to show that not only has this bridge crumbled, but, like, parts of it just which is what you would find. Like you would find these kinds of things. And again, sometimes the way that things have fallen, like they're consistent. So like it's evidence that like if something moves through, it went the same way. It's not like they just scattered random pieces. Like it's so and again, like, I understand that the average person may not notice that, but like as an academic and seeing that, I'm like, hey, this is accurate. Like this is accurate and that is really good because it's accurate. But that's yeah, like so like when I was in there, I was like, "Oh my gosh, like I don't wanna destroy these pieces because that's clearly supposed to be a piece of the like original, you know, bridge or whatever it was from whenever period." But like it's that's what we would find. Like that like we would find it that way. We would find it collapsed in different capacities. Like that's it's so good. It's so valuable. And yeah, like I feel like having that lens again makes it feel so much richer and sharing that with other folks who want to hear it I hope makes it a more fulfilling experience for them too.
I think it's like you're getting people who, yes, want to hear it and want to learn the archaeological element, but then you also are getting people who are just interested in the game, who then all
Yeah.
of a sudden like, wait a minute, this is a thing here, and it's just then you're actively learning while enjoying the game too, and I think it's a really really difficult thing to blend together, but you do it extremely well, and it must be from that original curiosity that you had when you were a little kid, right? And like
Yeah, I guess.
wanting to have that
I've been
coloring
playing
page.
Pokemon that long, so maybe it's all connected. Yeah.
As we round out, because I know it is late for you, and we want to be respectful of your time. I have one more big question before we're going to ask you to tell us the next big things that you're going to be working on and where to find you. This has been like the really kind of wrap up question that we've asked, not just this past year, but last year as well. Of you are, I would argue, an inspiration to many people, right? Both men and women alike. You're an extremely talented and badass archaeologist who goes out in the field with a pickaxe over his shoulder and is digging up history, and then also educating people at home using things that the everyday person can connect with to really highlight and showcase learning and history. You talked about people who might be inspirational, past women in the sciences in the field of archaeology, but you're one of those people, right? So what does it mean to you to be a woman in STEM who's also going to be inspirational for that next generation?
Oh gosh. um I well, I'll talk about so again, I said this. So I work at a local museum as well. I work there and I teach kids primarily. I work with the adults too and stuff, and I do a bunch of things there. I have many hats. But like, and I made this connection earlier. Like my audience online is adults. I make family friendly content, but my audience is adults. It's and it's mainly women. It's mainly women like 25 to 40. Some are married, have kids, some have kids, aren't married, some everything in between. And like I'm so thankful for those people, for all of these people that I spend my days with, that I share my content with, who support me. But I know that some of their kids do see like what I make. And so um I'm obnoxious. So I have always like fought for the things that I wanted. um I do hope that if there's a little kid, whether it's, the child of someone in my audience or a kid from a field trip or something like that. I've had like I wear a little bag everywhere I go and it has like a Pokemon hair clip on it and like a Stardew Valley pin and a couple other things and like these kids will notice it and they'll say like, "Hey, that's, whatever it is." One that they can be like proud to be interested in the things that they're interested in and two that like I hope they feel seen, I guess, because I have always wanted this in my life, but I don't really think I ever saw it or saw a way to see it, if that makes sense. Like I wasn't given resources to see these things. So being online, being public with who I am, I think that would probably be my biggest hope is that if, specific and not even just young people, because you can follow your dreams at any age. You don't have to be 8. You can be 80. But I guess that would be my hope is that I would, um, if I ever found out that there was like, I don't know. I actually, you know what? I will say this. I did have somebody reach out to me several years ago. I got a comment on a TikTok of somebody asking about archaeology, how to pursue it, what to do. And I answered it in a video. And they messaged me like 6 months ago and they were like, "Hey, I don't know if you remember me, but you responded to a comment of mine and now I'm in school for archaeology." And so I was like, "Oh my gosh." So, I have that one story and that's enough for me, but if there was ever another one, I think that would matter because I want women to feel visible in whatever space they want to exist in, whether that's STEM, STEAM, archaeology, Pokemon, anything. Like, I want them to be visible and be seen and heard, I think.
I absolutely love that story. And it's harder for people to reach out and actually say what they've done. So I would bet for that
Yeah.
one that has reached out, you've hit a bunch of others that just haven't said it yet, but know that you've made a game changing change in their lives.
Yeah,
I
I
know
hope
you
so.
enrich my life every Monday through Friday on your Twitch channel. And I think a lot of people, you do a lot and your passion really shines through. And even in our talk today, right? It's just an hour, but you're that passion, love of history and educating and learning really shines through.
Well, thank you, I appreciate that.
Mallory, as we round out tonight, where can people find you? What are big things that are coming up for you? The floor is yours, madame. Please promote everything and anything.
You can catch me live most weekdays, at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time right now, which is currently GMT -4. I do stream live on Twitch here at Mallory. That's my username. It's really easy to remember. It's really nice. It feels really cool. We have an amazing community over there, so we would love to see you there. I am currently playing Pokopia. If you want overanalyzed, brick by brick, literal analysis on Pokopia, you can find that with me and only me. Uh, so we are currently playing that. I also would love for people to check out my YouTube channel, which is very history and gaming focused. I'm working on a series of comprehensive history on different regions in the Pokemon universe. I'm also doing a series called Poke Panels, which is bringing real life academic experts to my channel and we talk about a topic. Balint was the first contributor where we talked about fossils and prehistoric life. And I have another one coming out, hopefully, fingers crossed, on Saturday with Melissa and Denial, where we will be talking about ancient history and Egyptology. And if you know anything about Lucario, we might have some things to say about that. That's all I'll say. That is coming out on Saturday. So I'm really love doing these talks. I'm trying to do one every other month because it's pretty big. But I have other stuff over there too. So those are kind of my big things that I have going on right now.
Mallory, thank you so much. I couldn't have thought of a better guest to have on International Women's Day than you.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge, your experience, your wisdom, and just honestly your inspiration with us today. It was an absolute blast, and I hope everyone, guys, go check out Mallory. All of her information will be in the show notes today. Mallory, thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your evening. Are you playing a game?
We're going to be doing some Resident Evil.
Okay. I don't want to watch that.
The T virus science.
It's scary. Okay, but that's cool. That is cool.
Pokopia for us next week. Munchkin has me save a fair bit. But
Resident Evil scares me, so I will be honest with you on that. Some of those things scare me a little bit.
Fair, fair. I mean, it is also viral science and fungal science. It's a lot of scary stuff.
Yeah, it's very cool though. I love that element. I do. It scares me a little bit.
Thank you, Mallory.
Thank you very much.
Have a wonderful evening.
And all ages, all genders, and all walks of life deserve an education. Come be one of us.